Dude.
Right. Good evening and welcome to another IPace driver show.
Indeed. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm IPace owner Gary and joined by, as ever, by...
Dude.
It's always good stuff. So we'll start as normal out with the news, but I think the news is actually going to be our main bit of the whole show today.
Kind of become the main topic, I guess, yeah.
So we've both done videos on this on our respective channels. This is basically the news that Ionity are moving from flat pricing of £8, €8 a charge on the end of, well, actually in a couple of days' time, at the last day of this month, last day of this month, to a charge rate of, is it 79 cents per kilowatt hour?
79 euro cents or 69 pence.
Pence, yeah, which is not quite a good translation of the exchange rate.
Let's gloss over that part. That's the least of our
worries. So, and that's obviously if you turn up and charge, that's what you're going to get. You're going to pay. Now, if you happen to be one of their consortium members, well, at least not one. If you happen to be driving one of their consortium members' cars, not if you're, I guess if you're one of their consortium members,
probably if you're a consortium member as well, actually,
you get the scanner. But if you're part of the VW Group, Audi, Porsche, or Ford, because they're part of the membership, and I think Kia as well, and Hyundai.
And Daimler, so if you've got a Daimler EV, you're fine.
Or Mercedes, then you can sign up, and Audi, of course, you can sign up for a subscription model, which varies between the different manufacturers.
Yeah.
But it's around £20 a month for some of them, and that then gives you charging around 39 cents a kilowatt. It's all very confusing.
It's all the numbers are all, everything that you get is around an ish.
Yeah. And the pricing hasn't been totally fixed for all these things. One thing which I have heard is that VW are going to be doing a discount, basically where you pay for nothing for charging for the first so many thousand miles.
Okay, I'd heard they were. I hadn't heard it confirmed, but I'd heard they were looking into doing a sort of
I've
supercharger type
deal. Yeah, I've seen that from several sources, so I think that's probably correct.
Okay.
And all of those cars will be using the CCS plug and charge standard. So we know Ionity have been talking about that for some time. They've started to experiment it, which is great. I mean, I love the idea of plug and charge, but this is actually for the first time ever using the proper CCS charging standard for plug and charge, where it basically charges back to a central account run by your car manufacturer.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this doesn't really help us because Jaguar is not part of Ionity. It doesn't help some of my friends who are driving MG ZSs as well because they're not part of the Ionity. So we are stuck with this rather large cost, which is scarily expensive.
I mean, I obviously I'm gonna behave tonight. But if anybody's seen my video, it did become a bit ranty, if I'm honest. But I mean, not without due cause. However. Yeah, I mean, it is a scary price. Well, scary is probably the wrong word, but it is very, very high. I think when you start talking about £120 for equivalent to a tank of petrol, when the cars are already more expensive to buy, it becomes a difficult justification. And while they're only one charger or one charging company with a very small number of sites in the UK, my point is, if that model were to be adopted widely, who's going to buy an EV?
And there is that true. And I think, I mean, you certainly weren't saying you expected cheap charging. You were saying you expected a reasonable cost of charging, which
exactly.
I think
it's
absolutely
all
fair.
I was saying was I fully expect to pay more, and I'm perfectly happy to pay more, obviously, than I pay at home. I mean, nobody's going to match Octopus's off-peak. Octopus's off-peak rates. That was my temper snapping. I'm not expecting anybody to match Octopus, off-peak domestic rate for commercial charging or anything like that. It's just the simple fact that there's a bit of a disconnect between more than domestic charging and 69 pence a kilowatt.
And I think, I mean, we do know that most of the charging people are not making huge profits at the moment.
Yeah.
Several of them have posted losses. So, and it is a bit of a chicken egg situation. Until there's a lot of EV drivers out there using the chargers, more than they are currently using. I think there was a figure somewhere I saw that in Europe as a whole, only charges are only around about 10% occupancy.
Yeah.
And that was the fast chargers, the rapids. Rather than it's not, obviously taking type 2s, a lot of those will be a very low occupancy. But
indeed, yeah.
And there's a lot of costs, and it's not putting the chargers in most of the cost. The chargers themselves aren't that expensive, though they are pricey. Obviously, infrastructure, locations could be pricey. We don't know what ground rents people are paying. I know a lot of time they've done deals with people, but the big cost is connecting to the grid.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, one thing I know with Ionity, not widely, but at the Gretna site specifically, is that they had to come to some kind of, nobody knows exactly what, but they had to come to some kind of financial agreement. In other words, they had to pay Ecotricity because it's at an MSA that Ecotricity had an exclusivity deal with.
That's another factor as well. But I think the big cost is getting the big cables in. I mean,
yes, indeed, yeah.
I mean, just look at what it costs to add a few amps, to 100 amps to your house. I mean, you're talking, or 3-phase, it's several hundred, but tens of thousands. Whereas they're talking several hundreds of thousands for putting it in. So they need to recoup that money. But having said that, 69 pence is still a huge profit margin. I mean, and if you equate it to sort of the markups they put on petrol, there's nothing in it. I mean, it feels like if they were truly a monopoly, and they're not in the UK, for example. In the UK, we'll have a look at this later. We'll look at the 100 kilowatt plus chargers we've got in the UK. I honestly are not a monopoly in that sphere at the moment. In Europe, in some places they are. And there's some routes you travel in Europe, and the only chargers you can use are Ionity chargers at that speed.
I touched on that, but I didn't really go into that in depth because I tried to keep it more general. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we are talking about speed. So speed of charge, I think. So there could be this argument. I mean, certainly if it was referred to the Monopolies Commission or whatever they call that these days, I think it would come down to saying there's a lot of chargers around. There's a lot of 50 kilowatt chargers around. The problem is, if you want to charge fast, you're very much limited to Ionity, Fastned, and you have got a few others now coming in Europe. You've got EMBW, Lego is starting to roll out their Mega E range, which will be really good. Yeah, and I certainly saw some of those on my trip to Berlin, where they were putting them in the same sites as the Ionities, which would be good as competition, and they aren't that expensive comparatively at the moment. I mean, they're still pricey. When I did the German trip, I thought Fastned was expensive.
Well, see, this is the thing. I mean, Fastned is one of the pricier. I mean, as I touched on before, with BP and Shell, depending on your payment method, they either become two of the cheapest or the two most expensive, excluding the obvious Ionity. Depending on whether you pay by app or pay by contactless. But Fastned, if you take that out of the equation, if you paid BP or Shell with the app, Fastned become, again, leaving Ionity to the side, they used to be the most expensive, I think. Ultrarapids, the 100 kilowatt plus. Yeah,
because they're 59 cents per kilowatt in Euro cents in Europe and 39 pence in the UK. Indeed. Although with them, you do have the option, even as a non-Fastned member, to take up a gold member for a month. So if you're just doing a road trip, you might also do this, because that costs £10 and it gives you 29p a kilowatt hour charging. So I think that's actually not unreasonable. I think around about 30 pence per kilowatt hour is a reasonable markup.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm happy up to 40. I think anything. I think 40 is kind of pushing the top end, but you do have to accept there is a huge capex involved in installing these, and it still brings it in. It's hard to quantify it exactly, but it still brings it in just a bit below the price of petrol. Yeah, really.
So there's obviously a lot of conspiracy theories around this thing. Obviously, are manufacturers key on EVs? Are they pushing it? I don't really honestly think it's that. I do think it's a lot about Mercedes, BMW. I actually forgot BMW, Ionity, but BMW are in there as well. Yeah. Porsche. All these people looking at the Ionity chargers and looking at them being used mainly by Tesla Model 3s, because that seems to be the highest use of them recently, and saying, hang on a second, we put all this investment in it. How do we get any advantage from this? And it now gives it. But one of my pet theories on this, and I've had some inside knowledge on this, is that by saying it's 79 cents or 69 pence, they can quote a huge saving to someone when you buy a VW. You're getting 10,000 miles of charging. You're saving this much money. And it's a very good marketing thing. So I think I can see that as being one of the reasons behind it.
Yeah, I think it's a very good marketing tool, if not for the fact that you could be paying that price anyway.
Yeah.
With other providers. Anybody that does a little bit of research should be able to spot the flaw in that.
But I guess they probably don't do that much research. I mean,
yeah, there is that. Yeah.
I mean, we've had the story coming out recently that some BMW dealers have been telling their drivers that buying an electric car gives them the right to park in electric charging spaces.
Oh, that's a new one on me.
Yeah, so that came out a couple of weeks back. So I think there's a lot of tales being told which people do buy into, unfortunately. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think this is definitely a challenge for the industry as a whole at the moment, because Absolutely. it does make non-Ionity members look. People look at. I mean, if I looked at that doing that Berlin trip, it would actually have made it 10 times more expensive.
Yeah.
To do that trip.
Exactly.
And actually more expensive than it would have cost me doing in the petrol car 5 years ago when I did it.
Yeah.
So that would have definitely put me off that. Although I do know how the alternatives. I would have used a lot more Fastned chargers. I would have used the BMW. Yeah. I definitely would have started using this new Lego network, because although that's quite pricey, there are ways of getting discounts on that.
Absolutely,
in fact, you can use the same trick to get a discount on Lego as you can on Ionity. So my video was all about how you can beat this rise.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at the moment, and I don't know how long this will last, there's a German electricity supplier called Maingau, and they are quite famous in the EV industry in Europe, because for a very long time they were charging 5p per kilowatt hour for any charger anywhere in Europe, including some of the very fast chargers. They did put that up at the end of last year to 35 cents, I should say, a kilowatt hour. Plus, there's some markup in certain countries. So in the UK, it's always been 40 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
They have said they're going to maintain that pricing for Ionity post the end of this month.
Yes.
So they've been charging that up to now. So up to now, they have been the most expensive way to charge on Ionity. Now they'll be the cheapest way to charge.
Yeah.
So in the UK it will be 40 cents per kilowatt hour, and you can sign up for it. Now some people have struggled to sign up for this because you need they use a system called SEPA to take their payment, which is the Single European Payment Authority. And to do that, you have to have an IBAN account, which they can get the SEPA from. Some question what Brexit does to that in terms of how payments.
Let's not go there.
But both myself and someone else have had success setting up with a TransferWise account, which is one of the cheaper way of sending money around. Haven't actually tried charging yet. We'll do soon as it gets those flips over and just see if that gets charged. But there was certainly no objection from Maingau on that. And the typical German efficiency, I got a charging card sent to me in 2 days after I signed up. It was just, and there's a fob on the way as well. So it was very, very well done, very good organisation. I mean, and the advantage of that, even if you weren't using Ionity, you get discounts at other chargers as well. Yeah. So one of the things they do is they have a tie-up with Engenie. And actually, in the moment, they are, because of the euro exchange rate, they are slightly cheaper to use that than pay cashless Engenie. So it's probably worth signing up on it. It doesn't cost anything to actually sign up. Just download the app and sign away, sign up. And that looks like quite a good way. And as I say, it works well on the Lego in parts of Europe, although it doesn't work on Shell Recharge in the UK, which is weird. Which is also a Lego partner. That's an odd one, but yeah, I think that's reasonable. Talking about expensive charging, Shell Recharge is another one which is pricey, but as you said, is depending how you do it, it can be cheap or not. And obviously, per kilowatt hour charging is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's my preferred model of all the models that are around. It is my preferred model. My ultimate preferred model is a price per kilowatt hour with then an idle fee.
Yeah.
So many, let's say 10, I'm just making numbers up, but let's say 10 minutes free idle time after your charge is completed, and then a fee. So
Maingau do this by, you get 60 minutes charging on just per kilowatt hour, and then it's 10 cents a minute after that, if you over, so to prevent overstays at fast chargers, which makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
But the interesting thing on that price model is that it's very different for a lot of other chip companies where they don't do any overstays or sometimes at times it's time cost from 1 minute one, which I think that's a very poor, because it penalises.
I think that's a poor model for a number of reasons. I think price per minute is a poor model because, first of all, you're beholden to ambient temperatures, charger efficiency, the car itself. You have absolutely no control over your charging speed other than buying a car that is theoretically capable of a certain speed. But I think it's a bit counterproductive because there's no incentive for the charging company to provide the best charging experience because they then make the most money by keeping you there longer.
Yeah, indeed.
And I just think that in general, and it also runs the risk, again, this was my primary point, which I think some people missed on my video, is it runs the risk of pushing people into, let's call it whatever you like, energy poverty, fuel poverty, or, you know, but it pushes you into a situation where if all you can afford is a car with 50 kilowatt charging speed,
you're penalised. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I do personally feel that per minute charging should actually be banned. I think it's bad all around. I know in some countries it's actually illegal to charge by the kilowatt hour, which is crazy because that this was all down to whether you're an energy company or not, and only energy companies can charge by per kilowatt hour. So so just quickly on the main gal thing, because it's just reminded me actually, it's not very good if you're living in Denmark. For some reason, Denmark has a very high per kilowatt hour charging for everything, and they've put a markup on top of the main gal charge for Denmark, which actually means it's around about 90 cents per kilowatt hour if you charge on Ionity there. So it's actually still cheaper to use the Ionity. As someone said from Denmark, this isn't actually a bad deal when they saw the Ionity charge. So yeah, I can get that because their pricing is so expensive. So the other real advantage, I think, per kilowatt hour is for people like us who the ABC, grazing charging. If you're only for topping up 20 kilowatts, it's a lot cheaper to do it that way, even with these new charging than some other other chargers. So I think that definitely has advantages. And certainly
you can take 10 kilowatt hours. And still be cheaper than the old flat rate fee, for example. But just. And some people did just top up for 10 kilowatt hours because it wasn't that pricey. So it'd be interesting to see how it goes. And I know there's been a lot of backlash against Ionity. I think there will be some investigations in this from some countries because there's been some pushback about is it German motor manufacturers abusing their position. We can argue that one. But I think it was interesting just generally because it brought up to my mind, where are we on 100 kilowatt charges for this country? Because we've talked about Ionity being in the minimum. And I'm going to show a map now. Let's see. Can you see my screen now? Let's see if this magic of the internet works. Not seeing it at the moment. But I do have the map loaded up to the side. So we'll drop it in post, as we'll drop it in Elon Musk would say.
Indeed.
We'll it in post.
So I have a map up, which I've taken from Open Charge Map data. So it may be missing a few charges because but most of the big providers do send their data to Open Charge Map. And this is all the 100 kilowatt plus chargers there are in the UK. So
I like how you say all.
All, yes, all. And you may notice that I could actually scroll this map up a bit and I wouldn't actually have anything missing because there's a rather large hole at the top of the country.
Indeed, I was going to come on to that, but you've nicely segued into it. Yes, in Scotland, we have 4 chargers of 100 kilowatts or faster. Those 4 chargers are all in the same place and they're owned by Ionity. And not only are they the only ones in Scotland, they're only just in Scotland at that. They're just about 20 miles north of the English border. But yeah, there's nothing in Scotland. Now, I just lost you there. That's your screen sharing, right?
My screen sharing is actually working now. There we go.
There we go. Hey.
Right, so you can see this big hole at the top of the screen, which is Scotland. So I thought we'd steal this shamelessly from Tesla Time News, the the rather brilliant show that the Now You Know guys put on. So highly recommended, even if you're not a Tesla driver, because they do this thing about what superchargers have been opened, what superchargers are, and 100 kilowatt plus chargers are basically our equivalent of that. They're ultra chargers, and they're what IPace owners are going to want to know. So we can see there are a few, and they're fairly scattered down, mostly down the south of the country. A few up and starting to come up near my way. So I'm just going to run through these just to give people an idea where they are. So we've got the BP Polar on the A27 westbound in Portsmouth, near Portsmouth in Hampshire. We've got the Shell 4-Way. I don't know what order these are in. I think they may be the order they were added to Open API.
I would guess that's probably the case,
when they came online. So I actually used this Shell 4-Ways on Sunday, actually out in the test MG-ZS we've got, and it worked very well. Had some slight issues with it. It wouldn't recognise my new motion card, so I had to get them to do a free. But they did do a free vend, and its customer support I thought was really good there actually. One top tip with the Shell ones is to sign up for their loyalty club, because then you get cheap coffee, which is very beneficial when you're charging. And some of them actually, some BPs actually give you cheap coffee when you're charging as well. So there's that one. There's the Shell at Banbury Road in Chipping Norton. Then we've got some of the Instavolts. So Instavolts have only just recently started to push up over the 100 kilowatt. Sometimes with shared charging. These ones are actually tagged as being 125 kilowatt charging.
Unfortunately, some of the tagging is wrong on these, I know, but I can't enlighten you as to which ones are correctly tagged.
So I've tried to do research on these to try and pinpoint the ones which are. I think I've got them right, but if anybody wants to, any of the viewers want to chip in and say, no, that's not working. So this is at the KFC at Barbara, which is, again, I mean, we like Instavolt. Turn up, tap your card, same cost, regardless of how you pay. Really good stuff. There's the BP in Wales.
I know,
Wales has got chargers, which is rather good actually. That they've got their 2 points there, 175 kilowatt chargers, BP Ultra charge. I put these down as BP Polar, but they're branded BP Ultra charge. But you can obviously use the Polar cards there if you want to in your subscription.
BP is one of the most confusing charging companies now, I think, in terms of its actual structure. Because they on-charge your car. They run Charge Play Scotland on behalf of the Scottish Government. They have BP Polar, BP Ultra Charge, and Charge Master.
Yes, which is the home charging side of it.
So you know, they're all BP, but they're kind of separate, but they're kind of not.
and it's really interesting that the pricing structure they have. I know we've had this discussion before about their contactless payment charging, which I think I object to the way they do it, but
I used to object more than I do now.
yes. Now we've got so you pay a premium if you pay by contactless. Basically, if you use the app, I understand with the subscription model.
I get it.
Absolutely, with the subscription model, you should get a discount. That's fine. If you're paying a monthly, you get a discount. What I object to is the fact you pay a different right on the app to the card without the subscription. But anyway, that's moving on. But it's great that they are turning up. So I've missed about Instavolt on the next one. There you go. It's an Intervolt. It's an Instavolt at Dorchester Road in Minster in Dorset. So that's nice to see there's actually some down that way. And makes doing a trip down to the southwest
a lot more convenient, shall we say?
And those ones did appear to be paired 125, so that's good. We've got our newcomer, Eon.
Can I just pause you for a second, just in case there's anybody watching that doesn't know about this? The paired 125 thing with Instavolt.
Good point.
Basically, the way it works is Instavolt has two at the sites where they have their ultra-rapid chargers. They are actually two 62.5 kilowatt chargers, but and they're provided from one cabinet. Now the cabinet is rated at 125 kilowatts, and depending on how the two separate chargers are set up, they can either be, as they call it, they pair them or they don't pair them. If they don't pair them, the best you will get is 62.5 kilowatts. If they do pair them, then that 125 kilowatts is shared between the two chargers. So you'll either get a single charger with the other one empty, where you'll get a full 125 kilowatt charge, or you'll get two 62.5 kilowatt chargers if, let's say, two IPaces are plugged into them.
Yeah.
Or you might get one charging at 80 kilowatts and the other one charging at 45 if you've got, let's say, an older i3 and an IPace. Let's keep promoting the brand. Plugged into
why not indeed?
So that it depends on whether they're paired or not. If they're not paired, they are two completely standalone 62.5 kilowatt chargers. So I just thought I'd explain that for anybody that didn't understand that.
So the next one we've got is the Eon one, which is in Birmingham, which is interesting. It's the first Eon charger. It's part of the Europe-wide Verta network, so you can use the Verta card on it to tap and go, or you can just play contactless. One of the more expensive charging networks. Used to be the most expensive, not anymore.
Yeah.
But very reliable chargers. I know a couple of people who use them. They've got two there, which are not shared. You can always get reasonably good fast charging. Then we have this one in Scotland.
That's surely some mistake.
So this is the Ionity at Girton Green, which we've kind of talked about. 4 points, reasonable charging, obviously expensive unless you go for the main Gower option. Or
an ID3.
Or an ID3, yes. Well, whatever. Or maybe Jaguar can sign up for Ionity, but that's another story.
Other Ionity EVs are available.
Yes, indeed. Then we've got the bipolar at Colchester. I've used this one. I used it when it was on free vend, which was very nice. Not on free vend anymore. They have actually triggered that one up, and that worked very well. We've got a BP Polar at Talgoff Road in London.
That's the
Hammersmith Flyer, yes, which every time I've been there has been either iced or taxis charging forever.
It's on free vend. It's still on free vend, although they say it's ending within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a problem, the free vends, because I mean, let's face it, if you're running a taxi business, you want to get free electricity if you can get it. And you're constantly, you might as well graze charging. So I can understand people using it, but it does. Yeah. There's no sort of overstay fees there, or at least not enforced overstay fees. So I mean, people do have their parking charges, but they don't apply to electric vehicles. So it's, that would actually be an advantage, I think, in that case.
But I think that one isn't on a forecourt, is it? Or am I wrong in that?
No, it's on I don't know actually where that one is.
So I don't know if they have the parking fees there.
No, they wouldn't. It's on the edge, isn't it? Yeah, so it wouldn't be on a. Yeah, it wouldn't have that fee. This one is planned. I did hear it was actually fairly close to going live, and may have even gone live now, which is the BP one at Hounslow West.
Right.
That's the only. That's the only one which is showing as planned at the moment. Now this shows you why Open Charge Map is a little bit unreliable, because we know there's a load of Ionities going into the extra services, and they have started some of those because the build at Peterborough is underway. Yeah, and also know that the build at Peterborough for the BP one is underway as well, but they don't show those on here. So I think to get planned for a future date, you actually have your construction's got to be completed, and you're just about to go live.
I think the plan for a future date means it's waiting on connection to the grid. I think is generally the way it is. Yeah.
So we've also got the missed one. We've got the Ionity at Milton Keynes, which I've used many times. And
I'm struggling to see how busy that's going to be now, because there's so many alternatives there.
Well, yeah, we've got all the Polars there, which are usually empty, so maybe they'll get you more use now. Certainly cost-effective-wise, it would be the case. The Mason one, which has saved my life on a few times, going down the tunnel, which I probably would still use because it is just so convenient, that one. I think sometimes there is a convenience cost.
Exactly, yeah. Which is sometimes you just have to bite the bullet, don't you?
That's why petrol's so expensive at services, but it shouldn't be that expensive. So it's things. And then we have our lovely Fastned charger, which we will meet up at some point.
Yes.
West Wales Street in Newcastle Tyne. That is Sunderland, sorry, not Newcastle. That's cool. My Sunderland friends would be upset at me saying Newcastle.
How dare you?
I'll be major. There is a reason I said Newcastle, because I actually heard they might be putting one in Newcastle. Which is
I did hear that as well, which I always thought was an odd choice.
Yeah.
For your next expansion when you're in Sunderland.
Yeah. Yes.
But I guess the people in Newcastle won't go to Sunderland to
Right,
charge.
that's true. Yes, yeah. So, what a Freudian strip that was. And then we've got an alpha one. So this is actually the first alpha I know, which is definitely over 100 kilowatts.
Okay, yep.
So this is the Sheepscar Junction one near Leeds. Apparently, very, very good chargers. I do like alpha. One of my top things about alpha is they have covers over them.
Another thing that I love about alpha
yeah.
is they enforce penalties for racing.
They do, yes, they do. They actually have their own parking enforcement company, which I think is
they do, yeah.
Which I think they potentially could make more money on than the actual charging. But there we go. Maybe that's actually what all these other companies should do.
Yeah.
that might cut the costs down a bit. And then to finish off, we've got a couple of Instavolts. So we've got another one down near Devon, which is really good, and that's a paired one, which I'm told definitely is paired. And then the one at Basingstoke, which I actually did use and did appear to be paired. So,
is that one definitely paired now? Because it wasn't at one point.
Yeah, so it appeared to be when I used it. I did hear it wasn't afterwards. So there is some dubiousness on my part on that one. So that one I would check out. See what the various apps are saying.
Worst case is you're going to get 62.5.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so which is still not unreasonable. And to be honest, in the temperatures we're at now, you're probably going to be pushing to get more than that on these fast chargers.
Exactly.
Which is actually something we ought to talk about, really, because it is something which really confuses people.
I think that's one for a future show, because I don't want a 2-hour episode today. But yeah, no, absolutely. I
think next show, and next show, I know we mentioned last week that we might get RDevD on this show. So unfortunately, he's actually doing a couple of weeks' work where he's not able to come on the show. But he has said he will come on the next show. So, and he obviously lives in a very cold environment, so it'd be interesting to talk to him about how that works out. So, so Edvard's going to join us on the next show, which would be great. I'm looking forward to talk to him about the whole charge thing, but also obviously about his
watt as well.
Yeah, his wonderful app. So so we haven't got that many 100 kilowatt chargers yet. But if you actually look at them from the south point of view, we're actually not too bad. I mean.
It's not too bad. But
corridors. Sorry, go on. The London corridor is fairly well catered for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I would say my biggest concern with them really is not so much the number of them. When you look at a nice big map of the UK like that, or England, let's be honest, it doesn't look too bad.
A little bit worse.
But it's where they are in relation to the main corridors that sometimes.
Yeah.
Isn't the most ideal placing, I would say.
It's not. I mean, if you look at my routes up north, I've got one in Cambridge, which I could go to, and then I'm really stuck until I get to Leeds.
Yeah.
Which I could do. I mean, that is actually doable in the iPace with the H264 range, which we'll come on to talk about in just a second. And then I could get up to the nice Fastned. And plug my car in and see if plug charge works, because it's supposed to be coming live in the UK shortly.
Shortly, but not yet.
Yes. But they have started charging for Fastned in the UK now. So which is a step. That obviously means they're getting their back end systems in place. And then, of course, I've got to rely on your wonderful Charge Play Scotland stuff.
Indeed. And I want to talk about Charge Play Scotland just for a moment, if you indulge me.
Yes, of course.
But specifically in relation to the 100+ kilowatt charging situation. And I think that if you can we pull the map down a little bit on your screen?
We certainly can. There you go.
Right, there we go. Now you can see, if you do the honours and circle the little Ionity with the mouse pointer, just so people have it right. Anything north of that, so in other words, Scotland, there's nothing above 50 kilowatts. Now, I don't think that is the fault of the charging companies. I actually think in Scotland we're now in a position of being slightly held back by having Charge Play Scotland. And I know that's a strange statement to make, but when you have got chargers that are all 50 kilowatts or AC all over Scotland, which are either free or incredibly cheap. I mean, I've used a couple of the paid ones, and the most expensive one I've seen is 20 pence per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
It is going to be a struggle, I think, for other companies to come in, albeit with faster chargers, but to start charging 35, 40 pence or more in certain companies' cases per kilowatt hour, and get meaningful business from a not densely populated country, let's be honest. I mean, the primary business is going to come from tourism, I would suggest, rather than inhabitants, so to speak. So I do feel that in some ways, while the ChargePlay Scotland network is brilliant, compatibility issues aside, that's again not for this video, the actual coverage they provided in Scotland is way better than the population numbers would merit, I think, and we've pushed ahead very forcefully in that and done a really good job of promoting EV uptake in this country. But I just feel now that next step, if ChargePlay Scotland isn't prepared to put in 100, 150 kilowatt chargers, it becomes a difficult business model for anybody else to justify, just because of the cheapness of the competition.
Indeed. So you've had a few Engenies coming in, haven't you, recently? So they're obviously finding a niche into there, even with their charge rates being slightly higher.
They are, however, and this is purely anecdotal, but every time I've used one, I've only used them 3 times, I think, in Scotland, but I've never seen another car charging.
To be honest, I use Engenie all the time, but it's very rarely I ever find anybody else on there when I go to one.
But I love them. I absolutely love them. They're almost, but not quite, up with Instavolt in my reckoning.
Yeah. Well, I slightly prefer them over Instavolt because of a couple of factors. Because I know I'm obviously driving the IPace, but I know a lot of other EV drivers. So the fact that they've got Type 2, they've got CHAdeMO on them, which Instavolt obviously haven't got. Yep. But you can also charge on Type 2 or CHAdeMO at the same time you're on CCS from the same unit. In some cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you can only charge on AC, but the CHAdeMO and DC are still...
Yeah, it depends which units you're on, but I think the ones up in Scotland are all the ones which are only the newer ones which only got the AC CCS split.
That's the one, yeah. I didn't realise they had other units.
I think the thing is, they look like 2 cabinet designs, the ones which can do both. They've only got one single control unit as such.
Yeah.
But
anyone who watches my channel, if you know, because I talk a lot about the eVolt Raption chargers. Yeah. And Engenie also use those eVolt Raption chargers. So if you see one of those, you can't charge on CHAdeMO and DC and CCS.
And unfortunately, I think they're moving to all those across the board. But the fact you can do AC at the same time is definitely an advantage.
That's still a bonus, absolutely.
And because the type of locations they put them in at, which tends to be pubs, so they are either you need a rapid charge and you use it as a stop as a point, or you're grazing. The fact you can do Type 2 at the same time is a definite advantage for the grazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I know they are starting to enforce their time limits as well. So they previously hadn't always enforced them, but they are starting to enforce their time limits. So but AC is not restricted as much as DC is. So which is great. I think it's a really, really good idea. So I do like the Engenie chargers, and they're very easy to use now. Obviously, I did have my problems with them, but now with H264, that seems to have sorted that out. So anyway, let me close this map up. If I can get out of it. How do I get out of it? I was
going to say, it'll close in about 3 minutes.
Just talk amongst yourselves while we sort this out. How do I get back to Skype? Are we not sharing anymore? Stop sharing? No.
I'm seeing myself in a window at the moment. Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, so obviously we'll just edit that bit out. Cut.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll fix it in post. That's
we'll fix it in post. So let's talk about H264 and a bit about range, because we've got a few minutes remaining. Because I know you wanted to add a bit to what we talked about last time.
Indeed. Yeah, and it's just basically, I mean, the point I want to raise today is that there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy between different people's experiences post H264, which where, for example, you and I have both said that we've noticed a marked range improvement. And indeed today, just tonight, it's 3 degrees outside. I drove a 92-mile drive earlier, and all motorway with just the very beginning and very end part of the trip being at lower speeds. Total motorway, 3 degrees, and my range was still calculating up as just over 200 miles on, and I was in comfort mode, and not driving particularly cautiously.
And certainly a few people have been told to come back and have their cars re-updated. So, but I also think there's a little bit about driving style here as well. I think because the biggest impact is when you're in eco mode. If you use high regen, you get more regen coming back. Although that's another thing we'll talk about in a second. But so I think that depending on your driving style, your mileage may vary for definite.
Mileage may vary, indeed, yes.
But I think for normal, I mean, I don't consider myself an eco driver, but I do drive an eco on motorways. But I don't otherwise, and I'm quite heavy-footed as well. I mean, it's a Jag.
I don't believe in. Don't believe in, that makes it into some kind of religious experience. But what I mean is, I'm not a great one for going all out to get the maximum range. I'd rather just drive it like a car. I'm not talking about flooring it in dynamic mode, but I'd rather just drive normally.
Well, as my shirt says, it's still a cat.
Indeed.
So I think there's
t-shirts available online.
They are. Help me fund my next trip, trip. But so I think there is definitely a driving style thing. Eco mode makes a huge difference. Now I've got a typical example of this. And I mentioned this, I think, last time. I was the Gaydon trip I do, which is the Jaguar Breakfast Club. Before 264, I wasn't able to get there and back without charging. Now I'm able to get there and back without charging. My mileage has evened out with my usual regular journeys at around 210 accurately. And the GOM now matching. The gasometer matches what actually happens when I do my regular journeys. I get slightly longer when I'm going on longer journeys because my journey profile at the moment is not the best for any economy. Temperatures have gone up slightly, so I think I might see a little bit more. Yours haven't quite caught up yet, but I'm hoping I might start to see some. But I think real world, come the summer, I'm probably going to get 250, 260, which is. I mean,
I can't. I don't know. I guess you're the same, but I actually cannot. I mean, every Scotsman's the same, but I cannot wait for summer this year. But not for the usual reason, for slightly less rain. I'm looking forward to summer because I really want to see what my range is now. I'm genuinely expecting to get close to 250. With those 22-inch wheels, which would be phenomenal.
So I've got two suspicions. One that sometimes the update isn't done properly. I think a really good indicator of that is if your gasometer value doesn't change when you've had the update done. Because it should change.
It should change, exactly.
And if that's the case, I'd push back and say, has it really been done? But if it does change and then you don't see much change in the actual real world experience, that's probably down to the fact you're running it in dynamic and you're not actually gaining much of the advantages of that, and you probably don't use light regen and don't get much of the advantages there. Now let's talk about regen, because this has been a hot debate subject, especially on the Facebook
Just before
group.
We move on to that, though,
of course,
on the same topic, there's one extra factor which you didn't mention, which I think is quite important and prevalent as well, is there are a lot of people still that don't appreciate the benefits of preconditioning the battery.
Of course, preconditioning is such a and so it's one advantage I don't get very often.
Indeed,
depends what I'm saying, but normally I don't get the chance to precondition the battery, and my 210 is without preconditioning.
Right. Yeah.
With preconditioning, I reckon I'd probably get 230. Easily, and preconditioning makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, especially on either your short journeys where you're not that worried about range anyway, let's be honest, but the beginning portion of a long journey, it has a very, very big impact.
I certainly noticed my energy consumption on my first parts of my journey is huge, and then it tapers off as we go along.
Likewise,
up to the sort of 79 kilowatt per 100 miles, which is not good.
I've seen similar figures when I've set off without preconditioning. Where I've seen it go from around about that kind of number to setting off with 30 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So it is just for that first portion until the battery's warmed up. Big impact.
Big impact indeed. So I think that's really important. Let's talk about regen, because there has been because there's been some discussion about this. There's on the Facebook group. There's a couple of posts which have come through, people saying the regen has changed and not for the better. We both felt it changed for the better, but that was at high states of charge. So definitely a higher stage of charge. You still get at 100% charge. You still get some regen now, which is great.
It's still possible to single pedal drive.
Yeah.
Even at 100%. You have to be more preemptive. You have to plan further ahead, but it is still actually possible to do, which wasn't the case before.
But I've been hearing a lot about lower states of charge not getting as quick a stopping distance on regen, so maybe not as much regen. Although my tests would seem to suggest still you're actually getting more regen kilowatts, but maybe not actually slow down as quick, which seems a bit odd. But
yeah, my experience. In fact, I tested it out tonight because I knew we were going to come on to this discussion this evening. I tested it out earlier, and I'm actually finding, and I don't know if it's me subconsciously adjusting for something that's without realizing I'm doing it, but I'm actually finding that my car's coming to a stop earlier than I think I used to experience. Now, I don't know if it's me subconsciously letting off earlier because it is taking longer to brake. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a bit of difficulty with that because it's actually difficult to get empirical evidence.
But what I'm finding is where I used to judge it very well. I mean, it became very instinctive very quickly pre H264, where I could come to a stop about a foot behind a vehicle at a junction without having to use the brakes. Today, I was finding myself having to accelerate again because I was coming to a stop about a full car length behind the car in front.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So the test I've done is I've got a stretch when I first start out, which is 30 miles an hour. At the end of it, there's a roundabout, and there's a road sign where I used to lift off that, and I'd come to a complete stop, and I am coming to a complete stop earlier than that. But this is a high state of charge because I'm obviously whereas, so I think that's actually where it's improved. I think at high state of charge, I'm actually getting more regen. What I think they've done is they've made it more consistent across the range.
Yeah.
Because I find I did a test tonight at low state of charge, so around about 20% state of charge, I stopped in exactly the same distance.
Yeah.
And I would have expected normally to stop a bit faster than that.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they've just actually made it more consistent across the range.
It is distinct possibility. And I think also there is another possibility that one of the ways they've got that more, as we've both experienced, where you regenerate more energy into the battery.
You definitely do.
And I think one of the ways possibly that they've done that is by actually, it sounds balmy, but by reducing the amount of regen effect, you actually get a more efficient regen. As you increase the amount of regen force, you actually lose more to heat.
Yes, yeah.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe they've done something like that so that they're applying less regen for longer distance and therefore getting more energy back into the batteries because of efficiency. Yeah.
So those two things together, I think, could affect that low state of charge. So the experience that some of the people have seen, there's one guy on the Facebook forums who said he brakes he goes to regen exactly the same point coming off the motorway every time before, and usually at very similar states of charge. Before H264, he'd stop just before the roundabout, in fact a little bit back from the roundabout off the junction. Now he's having to apply brakes to stop before at the roundabout. But that's at a low state of charge. So I think so. I can see where some people might see that as a disadvantage. It's certainly something to be aware of if you're going to H264. I think what you get with H264 definitely outweighs that. You picked up something new from H264, which we hadn't realised. I think earlier about the actual battery indicators showing in different colours.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, something we didn't pick up on our last video, which I just noticed on the Ionity road trip, actually, that I was just talking about a minute ago, is when you get below 10%, the battery gauge goes yellow. And presumably, although I didn't get there, I'm assuming below 5%, it goes red. So in addition to where it was just a white gauge before when it was the curvy one, now you've got the green line, it goes yellow at or below 10%, so at 9%, and then below 5%, I assume. It goes red, so you get more of a visual indication.
Yeah, and if it starts going red, I'd find somewhere to charge fairly quickly because you haven't got much buffer under
the
bottom low end now compared to what you used to have. So
I've done it once, but it was pre H.264.
Yeah. I think I got about 30 miles off after it going down to that, pre H.264. I would expect to not get very, very many miles at all now.
Yeah, exactly.
To Turtle and do so. Actually, while we're talking about that, there was the test. I can't forget which channel did it, where they flattened the batteries of loads of cars.
Yes, it was. Oh, I can't remember. I'd love to give them the proper credit. We'll have to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we will do because it's gone completely out of my head. But is it one of the car buyer type things? But I can't remember.
Was it Carwow? It wasn't Carwow, I don't think.
No, it was.
EV. Let's just put it in the show notes. Or put a caption up or something.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. Yes, I saw the same video where they did the e-tron, the EQC, the Model 3.
Yeah.
And the IPace, obviously, wasn't it?
Yeah. And the Audi e-tron, the EQ3, wasn't it? EQ3 as well. They had the Merc, which actually died first.
Yes. Yeah, and that was quite interesting, I thought. The only thing they didn't point out, which I wasn't sure about, was whether that IPace had 264 applied to it or not.
I don't think it had. That was the point I was actually going to make on that, because it looks like that was filmed prior to H.264. So
looked like it to me as well.
Yeah, so I suspect that was slightly inaccurate in terms of what they were doing, which is a shame. But I think it's actually a genuinely reasonable review they put out there.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I think that one of the problems, I think, is that I've noticed that some of the advertising has changed slightly now for some of the cars, where they have to quote the WLTP, but they're actually saying WLTP is ideal conditions.
Yes, I've noticed the same thing. Yeah.
Which never used to be the case. So I think there's actually people are definitely working on that basis. I'm just trying to see if I can find this video. I'd love to give them proper credit, because it's actually
well worth seeing. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of it, unsurprisingly, on the internet.
Yeah.
About it not being very scientific, etc. But I think partly the problem with the WLTP cycle is that it's too scientific.
Yeah, you're right. It's actually Carwell. It's Carwell.
It's Carwell. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, Carwell's. Yeah. So WLTP is too scientific. It is difficult to do a proper real world test.
It's very, very difficult, and I understand why WLTP is the way it is. But I would not discount something like that Carwow test.
Yeah.
Because it is. These are the sorts of experiences real people are going to have in their cars, as opposed to, ideal situations. And there's a lot more variables, but those are fairly realistic variables,
Yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, I think it was good to see that the IPace, even before H.264, outlasted the EQC, which is so often seen as a competitor on that. But the e-tron's about the same. I mean, it's the real world for most big EVs. It's, other than the Teslas, is around that 210, 220 mark, and I actually don't think that's unreasonable. I think that's for the UK particularly, it's not an unreasonable number.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, America maybe and Canada presumably maybe a different scenario again.
Australia particularly.
Australia, you could argue that Australia's quite big. But I mean, those kind of places, obviously, bigger ranges. I can see why people feel the need for them. But in Britain and even in Europe, to be honest, because there is such a good infrastructure in Europe now.
Yeah. Except for some places, like France, for example.
Indeed, certain areas of France, shall we say.
And while we're on that subject, I just wanted to give a shout out to someone we both follow on Twitter, who's just put out a guide to charging in France, Electric Felix.
Felix, yeah.
Well worth following.
If you don't know who Electric Felix is, check out his Twitter feed. He's also got some YouTube videos. They can be a little bit sporadic sometimes, but his Twitter feed is absolutely fascinating.
And he does drive iPaces occasionally, because he does this really strange thing where he hires EVs and goes around Europe. I'm not quite sure how he funds it, but
I think I almost ended up in some kind of verbal contract with him at one point, because he made some remark about doing a road trip. Who wants to join me? And I was like, yeah, I'll join you, jokingly. And he was like, okay, I'll meet you at Amsterdam.
Yep, that's a bit, but fascinating videos and some really good stuff on there. especially some detail on some of the charges. So if you're planning a European trip, his site's really good for finding out details about what charge cards you'll need. So particularly from the French one, for example, he mentions there's a particular charging network you need for Paris, which you don't need anywhere else in France, and those sort of things. So, and where to get the cards as well, which is really useful, which apps to download and all that sort of stuff. So, and also I really like the fact he actually visits most of the chargers in Europe. So before you plan your trip to go to Berlin, like I did, I actually followed a lot of his videos. He'd done the trip almost a week before going to similar chargers, so I knew I could actually find where the chargers are.
Yeah, I think he did Amsterdam to Frankfurt in an IPace once.
He did, yes, he did, yeah. So he's done a few IPace trips. He's done Berlin to IPace as well. But really good stuff, and thoroughly worth watching out. And certainly take a look at the French guide if you're going to go through France, because it's a challenge going through France with their local network.
So
a bit like Scotland,
I've never
actually.
tried it, but so
France is very like Scotland, actually, in that respect. But worse, because each province has got its own charging network. Which is locally run and funded, and they still have a lot of the old Type 3 chargers. The old.
Whoa.
So they're a bit challenging because a lot of the old the original Renaults had those 3-pin type chargers.
And their grid is sometimes a little bit flaky as well. The actual the current that you can draw from their grid in some areas is quite limited, I believe. Yeah,
and the other problem you do have in France, which is also a problem you have in the UK as well, is where a lot of chargers are located. Mobile phone signal is very poor, so trying to use apps in those locations can be somewhat challenging. I did try it a few years ago, but it's not the easiest thing to do. But so that's all good stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
Well, I was going to bring up one bit of news. Unusually, let's finish on the news
today. Why not?
Which I'm sure you've seen, which is the Norwegian decision on the Lexus and Toyota now self-charging hybrid adverts.
Yes. So they've decided that self-charging is a lie, which was the
hashtag that I tried to get going at one point. It was hashtag self-charging is a lie, but it never took off.
Which actually it was exactly what they said. I mean, that was their report. Self-charging is a lie. Yeah. So I know the argument in the UK has always been that self-charging is actually regen, and that. But I mean, I really do take objection to Lexus's latest advert. The one where they say it's got two power sources, because it hasn't.
Yeah, it's got two power sources, and then they just show a big battery icon.
Yeah.
That was very, very intentional, I think. Yeah,
it is very intentional. I mean, they've said it's intentional. They actually say that they are deliberately pitching against the fact you have time to charge. That's why they actually don't push their plugins very much, because it spoils their message.
Indeed.
I mean, I'm a former Toyota self-charging in quotes air quotes hybrid driver myself. So they're great cars, but that message does annoy me.
It was a stepping stone, but we're beyond it now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the battery vehicle is everything that you can get on that, but a much longer range. And I hardly drove my hybrid on petrol when I could avoid it. So but you had to use petrol to charge it. So
exactly, I mean that's the problem. And some of them, I don't have specific knowledge of the Lexus, but there's many of them where you don't have very much control over when it cuts in and out.
You don't at all. I mean, the EV mode I had in the CHR would only work up to about 20 miles an hour, and if you're lucky. So it wasn't particularly good for EV only driving.
Yeah, but I thought that was a great bit of positive news. And if anyone was going to do it first, it was going to be Norway. Let's be honest. Yeah. But
didn't the Dutch also do it as well? Did they? I
didn't know about that.
I think they did. I may be misremembering, but yeah. So anybody can put in the comments if that's right.
Yes, or not. Please enlighten us.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things which we're not going to win the battle in the UK because the ASA has already ruled on it. Although this latest Lexus advert, I think, might be able to be pushed back again.
The boundaries a bit further again.
Yeah. It's nice to see other countries actually understanding technology properly.
Indeed, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I went through a phase of telling people I drive a self-charging EV.
Yeah.
because it's got regen.
Yeah, it does, and it's got two sources of power.
Indeed, it does. Yes,
electricity does come from different sources.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now I think that's really positive news.
Yeah.
I think also that the fact that the Norwegian take up on EVs has been is so high, outselling out. And Holland actually, there was a stat which I saw from Holland about the EVs outselling petrol cars for the last month, which might have had something to do with their tax incentives closing.
I was going to say, I think that was more of a timing issue than anything else. But even so, it's still a very positive step. And I'm hoping to see something similar in the UK from April.
The benefit in kind side of things. That's something we ought to just brush over, because I think it's having an effect already. When we've already got the contract the NHS signed for was 700 IPaces, and that's only one NHS region.
There's Northumberland, I think, wasn't it?
Northumberland, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, with the benefit kind of at 0%, hopefully confirmed in the next budget. Yep. It's been announced, so it should be from the 5th of April. As a business owner, it totally makes sense to me to go electric. I mean, first year you can get, if you buy it outright, you can get your first year write-off, you've got 0% benefit in kind, lot of advantages. Yeah. And as you rightly pointed out, this is not about rich people buying cars expensively. It's about trickle-down effect, because where do most people's used cars come from? Where do 2 or 3 year old car comes? They come from company car drivers.
Company cars, yeah.
Yeah, and they're pushed out at a lower rate. It's going to reduce the rate of second-hand cars. It's going to put a lot of stuff out on the market, which wouldn't be. And my car will be, at some point, will be on the second-hand market.
Exactly, yeah.
In 2 years, 3 years' time. So I think that's a huge benefit for EVs as a whole, that we will start seeing some of this trickle-down economics. I shouldn't use that phrase, should he? But
yes, okay.
but in terms of that we will see those cars coming down, and I think actually that is probably going to be the biggest driver for EV adoption of anything.
Absolutely. The second-hand market is where it stands or falls, basically, really, because the vast majority of people in the UK, and I hate to generalise, but the vast majority of people actually buy used cars, not brand new.
Absolutely. The other thing which I think also has an impact is on infrastructure.
Yes.
The biggest drivers of infrastructure are company car fleet owners. They have a lot of power. I mean, they affect petrol pricing. They can do all sorts of things. And I've known of petrol forecourts being built because people have opened new factories. Yeah. If they start going to EVs, they will have a lot more clout to get stuff sorted out on that, and they will not stand for unreliable chargers. That will be out the door very quickly. So I think that could happen, and they have a lot of influence on motorway services.
Indeed, yes.
So hopefully that's something which we will see some movement on once that starts picking up.
One interesting point on that, or just on the service station side of things, motorway services rather, is the BP rollout. I don't know if you noticed on my thumbnail on my last video, my rant video, but the thumbnail I used was a picture of 2 IPaces charging at the Gretna Ionity station. But if you look behind it, is a BP motorway service area. Yep. So that Ionity is right next to a BP service motorway service station.
And we know that all franchise BP garages where they have a space they can put a charger will have 2 chargers put in.
Exactly.
And that's all the ones with Marks and Spencers, if you ever want to know which are franchised BP. So if you see a BP station that's got a Marks and Spencers, it's likely to get a charger very shortly.
All right. There's one just a few miles away from here, in fact, where my IPace died.
Yes. Whether that applies to Scotland, I don't know, but it's certainly that's the UK. So I was actually told that the target is actually the end of next year to have them all done. Yeah. So that was, I haven't had that confirmed, but that seemed to be
it's quite an aggressive target. I hope they achieve it, but I think it will slip a bit. I think there will be loads by then, but I don't think.
Well, I think they might have them all on the forecourt, so they may not be connected to the grid.
May not be connected, exactly. I think the first one is opening. The first motorway service one, I think, is due to open very soon, somewhere on the M6. Now, I don't know which services it is, but it's one of the M6 ones. Yeah.
Great to see that. I mean, I think one thing we do need to see some action on is this whole delay on getting things connected up. I mean, if I pass on, I do a regular trip into Norfolk. Like I pass Necton regularly there. You'll see me on Twitter asking every time, Instavolt, when are the Instavolts at Necton getting connected? Because they've been sitting there for at least 10 months, maybe even a year now, all nicely in their bubble wrap, all ready to go, and they're just waiting for the grid connection. And that seems to be a problem. But I mean,
the new option in Fort Augusta, same thing. I think in May it was installed, and it's still sitting there not connected. May last year.
But I kind of get it to some extent, because I know if you look at what the DNOs, the distributed network operators, would usually do in a year in terms of number of connections, it's not a lot. Certainly not a lot of very high powered connections, a few factories, a few things like that.
Yeah,
they probably got very few staff actually set aside for doing that, and no incentive to employ more staff.
Indeed, yeah.
Because I don't think they get paid a lot for doing those connections themselves.
No, I'm pretty sure they don't. I mean, I don't know exactly what they get paid. But
again, anybody in the comments wants to talk about that. But I think that to me is something where there's not many places I want to see government action, but that's something where I do want to see government action to actually get these things sped up in terms of connection to the grid. Because it's not lack of grid power. It is physically getting the connections made. Exactly. It is the problem.
Exactly.
You do have to dig very big holes and put very big switches in.
Yeah, I've seen some of the holes they dig, and they are very large and very deep.
Yeah, once you get megawatt cables, they are big.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work, but it is. I mean, I think it's just that there is very limited infrastructure for doing that at the moment, and that's possibly where governments can help.
Indeed,
we'll see. Anyway, I think that's probably about all we've got time for tonight.
Covered some good ground there.
So where can people find you if they want to find out all about you?
In terms of
your social media and your YouTube channel is Dude.
My YouTube channel is Dude, and I've got the abbreviated URL for that, so you can go to youtube.com/Dude, and my Twitter is @Dude. So
very straightforward.
All very simple, and that's the limit of my social media presence.
And you can find me IPace owner on YouTube, and Gary @Gary with 2 R's. I always have to say this, WMA on Twitter. And where that comes from is a long story, so I'm not going into. And I've got a lot of. You can also read stuff in Fascinating Tech. I'm doing MGZS EV review my long-term review at the moment for that. So I'll put that out there. But just so people know where they can find us.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, and as I say, all of my videos, I always respond to the comments. I know you tend to as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I usually respond to your comments.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed.
It's all good stuff.
So it's been a pleasure as ever, Gary.
Indeed. You take care, and we'll see everybody again on the next one.
See you soon. Dude.